Okay, guys, welcome so much. Thank you for joining me for this Jupiter and Saturn conjunction webinar tonight. I'm really excited to be exploring this extremely powerful transit with you all. It's a very pinnacle point in history, absolutely, but I also wanted to spend this time breaking down a lot of like the misconceptions. And a lot of there is a bit of misinformation going around with this. And I also wanted to just really show you guys some kind of cool historical things that often tend to kind of repeat themselves or play out as we move through these continuous cycles. So as I said earlier before I started recording, feel free to connect with me in the chat at any point in time. Because I'm going to be doing a lot of chart work, I'm going to be switching off my video. So it's just going to be the chart. So I'm not always going to be seeing like what's going on in the chat or anything as well, but I will be there and present checking on things as we move through the content. So let's begin with today's chart. So we finally have Jupiter and Saturn both at 0 degrees of Aquarius. So we can see that Jupiter is here at 0 degrees and 3 minutes of Aquarius, and Saturn is at 0 degrees and 16 minutes. So as most of you, I'm sure, are aware, the actual conjunction is going to be on December 21st solstice. This is when, by minutes, these smaller degree points that we have here will actually come into an exact alignment, okay? So we still are a couple of days off, but in astrology, as soon as we actually have planets coming anywhere, depending on what type of chart we're looking at, but really anywhere from like, say 10 degrees if we're looking at a natal chart, down to usually with transit charts about anywhere from 5 to 2 degrees, okay? So Saturn and Jupiter have actually already been conjunct really this entire week, because they began their conjunction from around 28 degrees of Capricorn. And even prior to that, because they've been so close in alignment as Jupiter has been consistently edging closer and closer to this Aquarius point. So I'm sure all of you have been feeling this kind of, shall I say, intense build up to this magnificent alignment that we are about to have. But what is really unique about this, I feel, is that not only is the specific conjunction alignment happening at 0 Aquarius, but like I said, all week we've already been experiencing this conjunction energy in Capricorn. And because we're having the conjunction at the first degree of a new sign, we have this unique experience of feeling a conjunction in dual signs. Say the conjunction was happening, much further into Aquarius, say 19 degrees Aquarius. We would have been feeling that conjunction approaching, but it would have just been, already starting to activate this kind of Aquarius and Uranian energy. But it's really rare to have what we've experienced of already having the planets in such a tight formation and conjunction, but in a different sign. So really we have been in this energy already, okay? So that's why I wanted to begin by sort of saying that all the excitement and the build up to specifically the 21st is of course very important, but it's just it's important to be mindful that we are already in this energy and the shift is already kind of starting to begin. And I'm sure, again, as most of you have been feeling since these eclipses, we've definitely kind of been in what I would describe as a bit of a whirlpool, right, of kind of cosmic energy. I think that these most recent eclipses, the 2 eclipses in December, late November and December, has specifically brought up a lot of physical things for people. That's been one of the main things that I've been noticing, just from clients, from friends, from my own personal experience. I feel like this eclipse was felt like on a deeply physical level, which if we look at it by, the axis the eclipses were on, it's sort of surprising because We know the eclipses are currently happening, excuse me, in Gemini and Sagittarius. So, these aren't necessarily the most earthy, grounded kind of signs. But I just feel that the build up to the current alignment with Jupiter and Saturn, remember that Saturn actually rules the skeletal system, okay? Um, a lot of people especially have been feeling like a lot of physical like aches and pains and discomfort in their body, and maybe some of you, in the chat here can sort of start to confirm that, that you have been feeling that energy as well. I know I definitely have been. And the 29th degree of Capricorn, guys, it's tough. It's a really harsh place because Capricorn can often have a bit of this kind of sparse, barren feel to it. Not always, of course, and please, if you are a Capricorn or have Capricorn placements, like, I'm not saying that you are sparse or barren in your energy. It's like we're talking archetypally here. And there is this kind of, if we think of when Capricorn season is, right, especially for the northern hemisphere, it's in the dead of winter. Capricorn season always begins on the day that we have the least sunlight. So Capricorn does have this kind of almost in its own way, like this kind of heavier, shadowy energy that often doesn't get spoken about. Because if we think of like shadowy energy or just like heavy energy, people tend to just think like Pluto, Scorpio, maybe eighth house planets or transits. But these two signs sextile each other as well. So there is a link, between Saturn and Pluto, especially because Saturn, up until the 18th century, was it was the furthest boundary of our universe, of our known, solar system. And frankly, probably at that time, like what we perceived to be the universe. So once we had the discovery of Uranus, Neptune, and Pluto, this shifted the energy of Saturn kind of being this place of boundaries, the end of the Earth, the end of our solar system, the end of the world. And it actually opened up space for these new transpersonal energies. So in a way, Pluto has a similar kind of vibration or energy that Saturn can have around, this kind of karmic feeling, or this kind of real, this never-ending kind of cycle. Like if any of you are going through a Pluto transit right now, which I would say if any of you have any Capricorn planets, you have been going through a Pluto transit since 2008, okay? Because we can see here that Pluto is at only now at 23 degrees Capricorn, and he will still be in Capricorn until 2024. So if you have any planets on the cardinal axis, so Cancer, Capricorn, Aries, Libra, you've been having a Pluto transit by conjunction, square, or opposition. So you guys will know exactly what I'm talking about this feeling of like this never-ending kind of death and rebirth cycle in some shape or form in your chart, in your life somewhere. Okay, so this always would be applied to however our own personal houses fall. But this energy that we've all been feeling collectively, maybe this past week or so, of having like Saturn and Jupiter both at this end point, the 29th degree in astrology is an incredibly important and sensitive degree because it is the final space before we are shifting, or we are birthed or pushed into a new sign and archetype. So, the 29th degree, if you have planets maybe natally, at this 28th or 29th degree, again, we'll also know what I'm saying around this kind of heaviness that you may have around the archetype of that particular planet, because it tends to carry all the weight of the experiences of what that planet has experienced via transit moving through the entire sign, okay? So this past week or so, we've all been at this kind of, standing on this edge, right? We're about to step into this new energy. We can feel it, we can sense it, but the Saturnian energy, he's kind of like this, this kind of crusty, grumpy old man. He's kind of like, a bit of that hermit vibe in the tarot. So, it's kind of like we have to do the work and the lessons of what Saturn's entire transit since December 2017 has been in Capricorn before we can kind of, pass go, right? And shift into this new space. So finally, on the 17th, we had Saturn cross that threshold and move into Aquarius, also a sign of its rulership, okay? The traditional ruler of Aquarius is Saturn. Now, modern astrology will associate the transpersonal planets to rulership of some signs, but many astrologers don't actually, still to this day, consider the transpersonal to be truly reflective of the essence of those signs. Okay, it can have an association, but in terms of being like a planetary ruler, like Uranus being, the planetary ruler of an Aquarius rising individual, often a lot of astrologers will be still looking to Saturn. Okay, so Saturn is doing this. It's really a bigger kind of Saturnian return period, because he's spent 2.5 years in his true sign of rulership, Capricorn, but now he's into his secondary ruler of Aquarius. So he's still a very strong Saturn. Okay, so we know that Saturn in its fall would be in Cancer. Okay, so in astrology, when we say a sign is in its fall, we look at the opposite house, okay? Because we're moving, 180 degrees around the chart into that opposition space. We go from the high point of a planet in its home sign, and we move into that opposing space of fall, okay? Then there can be other places in the zodiac where perhaps the planet is it's in detriment. But for example, I can give you, we would say that the sun in Leo is in its rulership. So if you have sun in Aquarius, it's like having sun in, its fall kind of sign in the opposite space, okay? So Saturn is really happy here. And thankfully, Jupiter, who moved into Aquarius today, so today is quite, a big energy as well. And I say big because we know Jupiter is the biggest planet of the zodiac, right? Of the solar system, sorry. So, wherever Jupiter kind of comes in, he magnifies and expands. So again, for the next kind of week or two, we're going to have these two in a very close energy. So there's this real, not only are we experiencing this push of Saturn into this new space, but Jupiter is coming along and really expanding it. And by having this specific conjunction at 0 degrees, a lot of astrologers are giving weight to this, of course, because the 0 degree is also a very sensitive point, just like 29, okay? So if 29 is the ending, 0 is the beginning. So this cusp point is extremely sensitive. So to be having such a powerful and frankly rare conjunction at, a sensitive degree like 0 or 29 in of itself is incredibly powerful, guys. So, this is a really beautiful conjunction. However, the reason that I wanted to, do this webinar is that I wanted to kind of help you guys break down maybe from some of that kind of pop astrology or pop spirituality that's been passing around, talking about the age of Aquarius. Because yes, certain transits that are coming into alignment from this solstice, from this Jupiter-Saturn conjunction. So I'm just going to I made a chart for this. Perfect. Okay, so this is the actual conjunction. So it's going to be at 0 degrees, 28 minutes on the 21st. At what time for me? So at around, almost 4:45 p.m., London, Portugal time. But there is a lot of other kind of like more Aquarius transits coming in, but also I'm probably going to burst a few bubbles here with the following statement. But the true age and birthing of Aquarius, guys, is hundreds of years away. We are not at this shift point yet, because the ages work in a broader 26,000, I think, 600-year cycle. Okay, so a long ass time. And each specific age is around 2,500 or so years. So when we are talking about kind of cosmic and galactic time shift points that are of such a span of time, okay, it's not just like the sun changing changing degree every single day and, going from 0 to 1 to 2 and so forth in quick succession. We are talking about hundreds and hundreds of years, okay? So yes, we now are living in a time of the shift. Yes, that is correct. However, what a lot of people are putting out that we are already at these spaces is simply not true. And I don't say that to be negative or, anything like that, but I say it to kind of help you guys bring back your focus and awareness to what needs to be done for Earth and humanity now, because a lot of these well-meaning posts and people talking about it, and people that are very, I'm sure, gifted intuitives and, potentially channelers and people like that have their own understanding or their own kind of, I can't think of the word, but their own perceptions, okay, of what this is. But from a purely astrological point, which is what the alignments are, we're not talking about energy here. We're talking about planetary and cosmic alignments. This is a specific skill, not everybody that talks about astrology is an astrologer, okay? And it's really important that you are getting your information from people who are astrologers. And that's why I wanted to give you guys my time tonight, because I really want to help you guys be able to kind of integrate and synthesize the much broader picture of what is coming from something that is so special and so magical and beautiful. And like, what a time to be alive, to be seeing these two coming into a conjunction. Now, they come into conjunction every 20 years. So if we look at it from that perspective, it's like, oh, well, big deal. If I live to 80, I'm lucky enough to see 3, 4, maybe in my lifetime. But what is specifically potent and powerful about this particular conjunction is that it is falling in an air sign, in Aquarius, which is the first, which is beginning a new 200-year cycle of these Saturn and Jupiter conjunctions occurring in air signs. Because for the last 200 years, except for a conjunction that happened, one that happened in the 1980s, all of the conjunctions have been falling in earth signs for around 200 years. So just to bring it back a bit, because I realized I started to skip off on one of my very known tangents, but I do just want to bring it back to you guys just with some of the age Aquarius info before we start actually unpacking this particular conjunction. And sort of what I was saying about this taking a few hundred years, okay? So the reason why is because when we are looking at the ages, we are actually working with sidereal astrology, or what other people may know as like Vedic astrology, okay? So this is where all of the planets are actually in alignment with the constellations themselves, okay? What is known as kind of like in alignment with like the, like equinox, yes, but not equinox as we know it in terms of, Western astrology. But the true age of Aquarius coming in will be when we have spring equinox, when we actually have the alignment coming in at that time, that equinox, in alignment with the constellation of Aquarius itself at the 30th degree, okay, which is actually the 29th degree, because in astrology we begin at 0, so therefore 29 is 30. So that won't actually begin, depending on many, many factors, such as like what house system you are using. This won't be until most likely around 2,300. Okay. Now, some people are saying it could be anywhere from like 2,100 and maybe 18 or 20 up into 2,600. Okay. So we are in 2020. We are not going to see this shift of the equinox in alignment with 30 Aquarius until this point in time. Just going to pause for a sec while I add in some people. So, we have a lot of very powerful Aquarian shifts between now and that point that are edging us closer and closer into this space. But we are simply just not there yet, okay? So sorry if I do burst any bubbles with that, but it's something I'm really passionate about sharing with people, because right now the alignment is at 5 degrees of Pisces, okay? So the degree point that this constellation shifts, okay, every 72 or so years, we only see it move 1 degree. So we still have a long time to go before this is going to come in, okay? So we're still very much in the age of Pisces. And frankly, I think that that's very clear when we look at the state of where humanity is, around where a lot of the fear is still coming from, where a lot of people are suddenly projecting a lot of like shadow religious indoctrination and a lot of fear around things suddenly becoming demonic again, right? This is a perfect example of age in Pisces gone awry. Sorry, I can't even speak my own English language. So, we still have a lot of work to do, but this Jupiter Saturn conjunction is a beautiful, beautiful signpost along this journey that we are sharing together in this lifetime, that is going to be such a beacon of hope in what has been an incredibly challenging, heavy, heartbreaking year for all of us in some shape or form, okay? So, I'm absolutely here to tell you that this is a beautiful thing, but I'm just here to kind of remind you, as an Aquarius sun myself, just to kind of reel it back a little bit, okay? And just not to be putting too much weight into moments in time where we just kind of sometimes get lost, in that thinking of like, well, this, it happened on the 21st and now everything is going to be the age of Aquarius. Like I said, this is true. Yes, it is a step closer. It is a bridging point. It is a signpost for what is coming, especially over the next really 40 years. And again, I'm going to go a little bit later into this webinar into some more depth around that for you. But this is a beautiful, beautiful signpost, okay? So I'm just going to pause for a second and just see if there's any questions or anything that's come up that I just want to kind of check in with you all and see. For those of you saying audio cutting in and out and all of that, my apologies. My internet is not the greatest connection, but I am recording this, so you're all going to get the recording, and at least hopefully with me recording it, it's not going to be picking up the audio issues. So everyone is kind of agreeing with what I was saying around the body aches and things like that. And good. All right. So no questions so far in terms of like the equinox and things like that. So again, we can come back to that. I just kind of wanted to pause and just, make sure we're all kind of on board before we delve a little bit deeper. So what I think is actually really beautiful, that really stood out to me when I look at this chart, as an astrologer, what I love is that, what everyone is making a big deal about this particular conjunction is that, yes, it's happening on solstice. Okay. So we know that solstice is that marker of the sun moving from 29 Sagittarius to 0 of Capricorn. So we can see that here. We have the sun right here at 0 Capricorn. Beautiful. With a lovely Mercury conjunction. And then we can see that, of course, we have then Jupiter and Saturn also at 0 degrees. And when I drew this up, I accidentally left some of the asteroids in here, not meaning to, but I noticed that we also have Juno up here also at this 0 degree. So we have a lot of this kind of like new beginning energy all kind of anchoring in together. We have Juno, 0 Sagittarius, the sun, 0 Capricorn, Jupiter, Saturn, 0 Aquarius. The other alignment that really kind of jumped out to me as well, that was only by chance by me accidentally including the asteroids, is that Vesta, the priestess, the goddess of devotion, is opposite Neptune right now. Okay, they're both at 18 degrees. So, for those of us, especially who are on a more feminine devotional path, there are a lot of beautiful alignments that are happening here with Juno, with Vesta. So in terms of your own sort of sense of self, it's a beautiful time on this solstice to be honoring your own feminine instincts and your own sensitivities, and your own, like, everything that has brought you to this point. The eclipses have been eclipsing out this past 2 weeks, a lot of preparing for this conjunction coming in as well. Okay, so in order to understand how this affects you personally, you're going to want to look for 0 degrees Aquarius in your own chart. So in a webinar setting like this, I can't kind of handhold and help you guys with that. But just to give you, for those of you that might be a little bit lost and not quite at a point of chart reading yet, even when looking at your own chart, this symbol here is Aquarius. Okay, so in your own chart, you would be wanting to look for this symbol and then looking for, say this says 15 degrees. Okay, then we know that 0 degrees would be somewhere here. Yeah, because 15 is the midpoint between 30 and 0. Okay, so in your own chart, you're kind of just going to look for where you think, like, what house 0 Aquarius is going to be in. And that is where this conjunction is taking place. So for each of us here in this webinar now, or for those who are listening to this later, we're all going to have such a unique experience of this because of what house it's in our charts, what aspects it's making to our own planets, what kind of annual perfection year we may be in. There's so many factors and layers to your own chart that are going to give you such a wealth of information. Okay, so for tonight, I'm really just talking about the collective stuff. But just if you are curious, you want to look for 0 Aquarius in your own chart to start applying a lot of what I'm going to share with you tonight into your own experience. Okay, so I love, like I said, seeing all of these zeros to me. Just as an astrologer, it's the numbers that kind of get me, and I was like, wow, that's really beautiful. I love seeing this. So the charts that I wanted to kind of show you guys today, we're going to kind of time travel a little bit, a few hundred years at a minimum. But it's important to know that this particular conjunction for the collective, for us here now in a physical body, having a very physical human experience, is that it's initiating a brand new 200-year air sign cycle for these conjunctions. Okay, so we need to break down and see, what are these two planets in of their own? Okay, how do they function separately, and then how are they functioning via conjunction? So, the essence of Jupiter is really about belief systems. Jupiter rules Sagittarius in the 9th house. So it's always going to have this kind of higher learning, higher mind, foreign lands kind of, curiosity. It's very much the planet of spiritual growth. I always see, Jupiter in our natal charts as a bit of a guardian angel, right? Wherever you have Jupiter, usually in that house is kind of where the universe is always going to give you a bit of a helping hand. It doesn't matter how challenging things are in your life, in that particular life area. It's like, in that particular life area, you will always kind of be handed, a little bit of a bump from the universe, okay? You'll always be kind of, instead of just before you kind of land on your butt, your angels are going to kind of sweep in and kind of carry you into a situation of more grace and ease. Now, Jupiter won't always give us everything that we desire, right? Because Jupiter can function like, it expands what it touches, okay? But for good or for ill, it's really up to you, the individual, and what it is that you are experiencing. Because Jupiter can also represent, of course, excess and overindulgence, okay? So it's not always this kind of picture perfect planet, but for the most part, it's a benefic, okay? Jupiter, Venus, they're benefic planets. When we come to Saturn, we're now talking about, in ancient astrology, this is a malefic. Saturn was always seen as a bit of a danger point, right? Like, oh no, you're about to have a Saturn transit, like, get ready for, a bit of challenge and harshness and false starts. So Saturn is the planet of structure, discipline, boundaries, of hard work. But Saturn, like Capricorn, the symbology of Capricorn being like that mountain goat, climbing slowly and steadily to the top of that mountain, all of the hard kind of challenges that can come from climbing up that side of the mountain goat slowly and steadily, one foot above the in front of the other, slowly but surely makes it to that point. It doesn't matter how long it takes them. It's the ambition and the drive to get to that point. Okay, so that's how Saturn functions in our chart. So seeing these two come together in Aquarius is really powerful, because Saturn in Aquarius, like I said earlier, is in its home sign, its traditional ruler. So just like in the Capricorn transit, we have a very high functioning, powerful Saturn transit, for 2.5 years. Now with Jupiter coming in, it's going to be expanding this energy and being at this 0 degree, of this, rebirth energy. We now have the alignment of new beginnings happening on the degree of new beginnings. So it's really saying that, especially for those of us who are doing conscious work, in whatever shape or form that takes place, whether it's personal development, whether it's community and collective work, activism, absolutely, being Aquarius. Those of us that are, in alignment and in tune with that frequency are absolutely able to kind of, really take up the benefits of what this alignment is bringing in. And like I said, for the next 200 years, it's initiating a very powerful cycle of air sign conjunctions. So this is really what is symbolizing the age of technology that we are sort of stepping into. I find it fascinating, just having a look at some of my notes that I took here before I began this tonight. And, Saturn moved into Aquarius right at the end of March of this year, and was just there until the retrograde kind of began over the summer, June, July period. So Saturn really moved into Aquarius right when, the kind of global quarantine period began in that late March kind of time. And it's fascinating to me that with Jupiter moving into Aquarius today, but knowing that these two have been conjunct in the final 2 degrees of Capricorn as well before they've shifted into Aquarius. So this has kind of been like a week-long transit, with Jupiter, which is about knowledge and expansion and bringing us, humanity kind of like a gift or a way forward. We have it's no coincidence that the and this is, I'm not getting into by any means, guys, like this is not a platform for like discussing beliefs or different things like that. I'm just simply stating the facts in terms of like global happenings, is that the vaccine has been made public and people have started to receive the vaccine with the initiation of Jupiter coming into Aquarius. Okay, so another amazing, like, cool Jupiter Aquarius thing I saw is, like, for those of you that are into astrology, which obviously you are, you're here with me tonight. I saw that really popular astrology Shani Nicholas launched an app tonight, and I'm like, that can't be any more like Jupiter in Aquarius than an astrologer, releasing an app teaching and guiding you on astrology on this alignment. I'm sure she did that on purpose. But it's amazing to see these kind of technological advances and things like that happening already, because that's really what this age of technology for the next 200 years is going to start shifting us into, okay? Because Aquarius rules technology, inventions. It also rules astrology. If we look back at the one kind of conjunction that we had in the 1980s, because the way that these conjunctions work as well is that when they're every 20 years, but every 200 years we see a cycle shift. But we always, in that 200 years, experience one conjunction that is the precursor to the next 200-year cycle, okay? So whilst we've been in this earth sign cycle, we did have the one air sign conjunction in the 80s, okay? And what really took off very quickly in the 80s was technology, right? This is when, the computers were starting to kind of be worked on a little bit prior, in the 70s and stuff. But really it was the 80s that started to kind of really heavily start to kind of, I can't think of the word, but like, what am I trying to say? Invest in technology, okay? And I say invest because we were still in this 200-year earth sign cycle prior, okay? So we've really been in what a lot of astrologers have been saying, been in like this an age of economics, right? The astrology aligns with how even people that don't follow astrology know we have been in this kind of industrial revolution and very, capitalistic society where it's been, very kind of much about work and money and, being of service and all of these kind of earth sign themes, okay? That is where we have been. Where we are going is now into this much more technological, intellectual kind of mini age, right? A 200-year period. Like, it is a big period of time. And what is special for all of us is the fact that, yes, we are experiencing that shift, okay? Not everyone, for the past 200 years is here now to experience this shift that we are having. So that, more to me as an astrologer, is what I think is brilliant about this transit, more than it just being on solstice, okay? Because solstice happens every year. Solstice is a consistent shift. A lot of, energy tends to get put into, oh my God, it's solstice, solstice magic. And, the kind of memes I'm talking about that get shared around, and it says like, share this post and you'll magically manifest like whatever it is you want. Like, we're not here for that kind of stuff, right? Like, we're here to really look at these alignments and look how they can truly, affect not only our lives, but our collective experiences. And the poignance of having these two being alive while we're having this big shift into this new age is like incredible. And super exciting. So again, I'm going to pause for a second, just check on some questions before I start taking you guys back in time. So you guys are just sharing with me the houses, which is great. Below us, it's quite interesting that now technology and science have been highly questioned during a huge collective event that marks the beginning of that energy. I love that, below us. It's a really great observation. Because if we think about it, right, it's human nature to firstly be comfortable, right? And it's also human nature just generally to kind of question things. We fear what we don't know, okay? So what I think Bilal is kind of saying is, yes, there's a lot of like fear around science and medical developments and things like this at the moment, because people are afraid. They don't know what's going on. And so, what our kind of ancestral, like the lizard brain that we all have, right? We get into like that fight or flight mode, and we panic and we want things to stay the same. And so these Aquarius shifts that are particularly coming in between this weekend and up until Pluto shift into Aquarius in 2024 is going to trigger a lot of this in people. But let's put it into perspective, because if we think back to 200 years ago, when we would have had this particular Jupiter Saturn alignment, but in Earth signs for the first time, okay? Imagine the general kind of resistance and confusion and doubt and questioning that people would have had around, stepping into a more, and I mean, with reason, right? Because at the end of this 200-year cycle, we can see negative connotations with this age of economics, okay? But imagine they hadn't quite delved into all of that yet. And, there would have been a lot of fear about like, what is this, all of these machines that are able to do our jobs for us now? And what is this new strange world that we are living in? Okay. So we're very much on this kind of precipice of this collective global energy of, we have a better and higher way of doing things, but we have to, really trust those who have knowledge about this and kind of stay in our own lanes, right? Like, it's very important to be aware of what is going on, and that we are sovereign beings and we have our own choices and our own freedoms, absolutely. But we also need to, trust that these technologies for certain things are here to support us, because it's always about constant evolution. If we are here as a human being with a physical body, having a physical experience, we are constantly evolving. That is the nature of Pluto in our natal charts. Pluto is our soul's evolution. So, if you are here right now, that's because you have more to evolve and more to become aware of and more to experience and learn and embody and question and be curious about. So, there's never this kind of marker point of like enlightenment in the way that a lot of people tend to market that at us, right? Through that kind of patriarchal lens of, sign up to my course and you'll be enlightened, or do 1, 2, 3 steps with me and you'll be enlightened. It's like, no, we can use these tools as a way to continually evolve and shape our perceptions and experience. But there's never really this kind of marker point, I think, that a lot of kind of patriarchal and capitalistic and economic and all of these kind of things try to sell us with, frankly, a lot of Western spirituality, right? Because that point, it's like you're kind of chasing something that's never going to necessarily appear, because it's going to constantly shift and evolve, and the lesson will always continue for you in some shape or form. But you just build awareness and you build trust in yourself and you build skills to assist you when these situations, kind of appear in your personal life. So Aquarius energy, is here to bring back, a sense of community. I really feel that in particular, the transit of Jupiter, because Jupiter spends 12 months per sign, Saturn spends 2.5 years, okay? So the conjunction right now is sort of in focus and very important, but this conjunction is brief, right? And it's not going to happen again for 20 years. So, we're going to have Jupiter in of itself doing its own thing as it moves through Aquarius, and Saturn will take twice as long to follow in these footsteps, okay? So they're just having this brief kind of meeting and this connection and this new beginning point in this time and space. But I really feel that as Jupiter over the next few months, because Jupiter is going to fly through Aquarius, guys. Jupiter is actually going to move into Pisces this year. This year, in 2021, because it's actually going to get into the first couple of degrees of Pisces before it even begins its retrograde. Like, it literally flies through the entire sign. So I think that Jupiter's movement through here is what is going to start to allow, reconnection societally, right? Being able to move around in our communities with more ease. But it's still going to be a few months, okay, for this to kind of roll out. I feel that Saturn is going to have to cross the degree that it was at when it went retrograde, which was around 1-2 degrees of Aquarius. That's how far it got into, like I said, back in the beginning of the year, March, April, up until about, I think, June-ish, it went retrograde. This was when we were all, quite actively, in our kind of quarantine bubbles, very much so at that point in time. So I think once Saturn and Jupiter of themselves cross that point, it's going to let us start to have these restrictions kind of eased. That's just frankly, my personal astrologer's take on this, okay? But what I want to show you guys now is a little bit of time traveling, okay? Just to kind of put this all into perspective for you, because I think what is also a little bit confusing, again, confusing but cool, but about this particular conjunction is I'm sure some of you guys have been seeing things like people saying, oh my God, it's the first time in 600 years that this has happened, or it's the first time in 850 years that this has happened. And yes, there are certain things that are firsts with this energy. So I want to kind of take you guys on a bit of a journey and actually have a look at what was happening the last times that we had some Jupiter and Saturn stuff happening in Aquarius, okay? So let me take a look and see what chart I want to show you guys first. Let's time travel back to 1226, which is the last time that we had, actually, let me just find this chart first when I'm not talking, because I'm going to just confuse myself. What am I looking for? So Jupiter, Saturn, 1226. Excellent. All right. So this particular conjunction, we had, of course, like I said, Jupiter, Saturn in conjunction in Aquarius. This is the date that's been thrown around about the last most observable conjunction, okay, in this sign, okay? In certain parts of the world, if you're blessed enough on Monday, you're going to be able to see Jupiter and Saturn actually coming into this alignment with the naked eye, okay? Sadly for me, living in such a rainy, cloudy city as Porto, I'm not going to have this luxury, but for some of you, you may be lucky enough to actually see this alignment happen, okay? So yeah, you will actually have, sorry, I just got distracted because someone said something really cool, which is Jada. She said 0202 degrees is 2020 reversed for the 1226 conjunction. Amazing observation, Jada. I didn't actually even notice that, but yes, you're correct. So for those of you that are super into like number synchronicities and numerology and stuff like that, that's a very amazing kind of sync to see there. So what Jada is saying is we can see here 0202 2020 backwards. So the things in this chart that kind of jumped out at me, and what I kind of just want to show you guys in terms of history is like, what was happening in the world and stuff at this time, okay? Because, what is Aquarius? Aquarius is, yes, it's the sign of humanity, being a humanitarian. It's about humanity. It's about people, groups. Like I said earlier, the Uranus energy brings in more of like, this kind of cosmic astrological awakening, sort of, sudden revelations kind of energy. Aquarians can often be perceived or labeled as like, kind of weirdos or like genius kind of strange energy. But the thing is, with Aquarius, and I'm speaking to you guys as an Aquarius, we're also Saturn ruled. So, we can actually be a very, conservative bunch in our own ways. And I mean conservative in the sense of like, Aquarius is a fixed sign, okay? So when an Aquarius person or Aquarius transits, Uranian type people, when they get set on something, okay, it is so hard to break them out of that cycle. You can show them a million other truths and ideas and perspectives, but they will be completely like sort of stick in the mud, okay, about like, no, this is how it is, and this is how it is for me, and this is what I am doing. So you often see with Aquarians as they kind of age is like, they have this kind of young, when they're young, they're like, oh, like this more hippie vibe and really free and all this kind of stuff. But maybe they're so into like this freedom and this kind of, different way of being that they actually get stuck in time with that. Okay. So it would be like seeing, like that person, in, the projected age of Aquarius, of like the late 60s and 70s of, the hippie kind of revolution in that period, but people who are still so hung up on that time period, and they're actually kind of missing out on, like we sort of said earlier, these technological advances and all these things that Aquarius energy will continuously kind of bring in. So it's really important, especially guys with the nodes right now in Gemini and Sagittarius, to yes, okay, it's important to be, in alignment with what you believe, yes, but like what you think you believe may not necessarily be like what you think. And so the more you're getting stuck in my beliefs or my way, or this is that, or that side's wrong, or it's them, it's not me, it's not us, it's a way of getting lost in that energy, okay? So we actually need to be more kind of open and humble and, sort of like, okay, like this is what I always thought, but now new information is being presented to me that's showing me that actually it's this way, or there's a new kind of perspective that I can take on board. So you want to be mindful with all this Aquarius energy that you're not actually getting too stuck into things, because it can be the shadow of an Aquarius. And like I said, I speak from a lived example, right? I know I personally need to be conscious of like, when am I getting too stuck in my life? Where am I actually being, unwilling to be, Aquarius can suffer with, not being overly tolerant. And that can be surprising for people, when we move out of, astrology 101, like pop astrology, and really start talking about the archetypes of the sign. Even though Aquarius is kind of penned as this, very humanitarian freedom kind of sign, they're not always the most tolerant individuals, okay? Aquarius, they're very aloof. There's this energy of, loving humanity, but hating people, okay? And those of you that know me personally, I'm sure will be having a laugh with that. But it's a big lesson, and I know I need to be more consciously aware of that, of like, how can I be more supportive for the people as well as the collective, right? That's going to be a big lesson with a lot of this Aquarius stuff. So anyway, I digress. Tangent, we're back to 1226. We've time traveled. So there's not actually too much in terms of the chart with this that really kind of made me go, oh my God, okay. But we can see this nice little Aquarius stellium here at the time. We've got Chiron and Venus here, amazing. There is a bit of a yod happening here between the South Node, kind of with Lilith and Ceres, but not really. So, aspect-wise, what else is there? There is a square to Mars, but, that's getting a little bit too specific to the astrology of the time, as compared to what's happening now. But I just wanted to show you guys this chart first. I'm going to show you another chart, and then I'm going to jump on to like Wikipedia and do some research and show you guys like what was actually happening at these points in time. Okay. So yeah, as I really love, like I said, what Jada said, the number thing is super cool. So let's have a look now though at the last Saturn Jupiter conjunction in Aquarius. That we had it, again, we know that we have the conjunction every 20 years, but it has to move through all of the signs. So the last time we had it, 1405. I think it's this chart. Yes. So what really struck me about this chart in terms of the astrology first, before we start delving into global happenings, is that have a look at this chart, guys. Look what is here at the 22nd degree of Capricorn and Cancer. We have the nodes, okay? So at that time, the North node was transiting through Cancer. The South node was transiting through Capricorn. So prior to the nodal shift that we've had in 2020 this year in May, we actually had the nodes in exactly the same points, right? We had the North node moving through Cancer during most of 2018 and 2019. End of 2018 into the beginning of 2020. But what really blew my mind is the degree that they were on the exact conjunction, because what happened at 22 degrees of Capricorn this year, we had the very rare transit of Saturn conjunct Pluto, okay? And again, this does happen every 37 years, but the rarity was, it only happens every few hundred years in each of the signs, okay, the way that it plays out. So it happened at Capricorn at this degree. So I think it's very, very interesting that the South node, it acts as a funnel, okay? It's like a release point. That at this time, 16th of January, 1405, while we had this conjunction coming into play that we're about to have, that this year we had really one of the biggest 2020 signatures and ongoing. I have some work up from that time. I would recommend just having a look on my Instagram, Temple of Cosmic Astrology, and just have a look at some of what I was writing around that time of year, because I was sharing some more specific insights into that energy at that time. But I think it's really fascinating that, this is why astrology is such a powerful tool when used in alignment with historical studies and historical events, because time does move in cycles and events in history do repeat themselves. So, every time these alignments come back through, we have a chance to redo them, right? With hopefully the knowledge and wisdom that we have gained in the hundreds of years in between whilst we have had that transit, okay? So we can see here that they were conjunct at 23 degrees of Aquarius. The other thing that jumped out to me in this chart, maybe that was it actually. So I just wanted to kind of show you guys that. I'm just having a look what Izzy's saying. So the decline of the Islamic Golden Age, connected to astrology's Western Hellenistic history too. Izzy, yes, and I am going to touch on some of that too, regarding some of this historical stuff, but that's a really great point, because as usual, we have to say that unfortunately, the Islamic history isn't really looked at enough because it's become so suppressed in the modern day from the fall of that time period, okay? So I wanted to show you guys some things that were happening around this time. So just bear with me a sec while I just switch my screen sharing around. Sorry, guys. All right. So 1226. I'm not going to touch on this one as much, guys, okay, because really what I wanted to delve into that's much more kind of going to probably resonate a little bit more, and it's more specific to these times, is what was kind of happening in the early 15th century. But I just wanted to kind of have a quick search, like what happened in 1226 AD. So historical events on 1226. All right, so there's obviously websites that go into more depth, but I wanted to kind of share this with you guys because I thought it was really interesting. So on September 11th that year, it says the Roman Catholic practice of public adoration of the Blessed Sacrament outside of Mass spreads from monasteries to parishes. So let's think about that in the context of Aquarius, okay? Because we can see here that a shift of this ritual within the church was brought into a space of being offered more to the people. Okay, so it came from just being inside the monasteries and kind of being like cloistered away and just for the, you know, the priests, and it moved into this kind of parish environment where it was still the priests, but it was bringing more people into the parishes for worship and to be able to, like it says, the public adoration, right? Because they have to be dramatic about it. But I found that really interesting just of that particular year. But I want to touch on, I'm so glad Izzy brought up what she said, shared. I'm just going to bring up that chat again so I can see. But Izzy wrote, if you guys haven't seen it, so she said, early 13th century, historically, notably Mongol invasions, the decline of the Islamic Golden Age. So this was a really big thing that was happening at this time, and it's what I want to touch on too, because again, it's so easy when we see these alignments to go, oh my God, it's the age of Aquarius and it's so magic, and oh my God, we're shifting into a new age and love and light, like, you know, and it's just not always like that, guys, because we have to think, like, if Aquarius is all about bringing together humanity, on the opposite end of the spectrum, we're going to have the separation of humanity. Okay, so these cycles, as much as they bring in great advances in technology and maybe, you know, changing like through, you know, through a negative connotation could be these invasions, but then these invasions have the run-on effect of changing dynasties and changing historical, not only like the historical kind of decade or period, but it can change the course of history. Okay, this is what can come into this Aquarius energy as well, and I'm going to show you this too through some other kind of explorations in more modern times. And Lisa, September 11 is the new year in the Olmec and Ethiopian calendars. Amazing. Okay, so that's another, I wasn't aware of that, so very interesting indeed. So that's kind of 1226. There's not too much with that I wanted to go into, but I did just want to show you guys, you know, in terms of the charts and things like that. But 1405, let's use this same website. So let's do this first. Because there was one that kind of started putting a lot of puzzle pieces together for me with certain things. No, this is not the page I want. Oh my God, I was here before, surely. Oh my God, sorry guys. You're getting me live here, so you never know what's gonna happen. Okay, so what I found really interesting, no, it's not this website, sorry guys. A Katie special, come on. What do I want? Wikipedia, here we go. So what jumped out at me around 1405? Many things actually, okay? But the first that I want to discuss with you is births. All right, so we have Constantine, one of the last Byzantine emperors, okay? Why is this important? Because his death in 1453 initiated the fall of Constantinople. And this was actually one of the many significant points in history that shifted the Renaissance age, okay? You know, it was a pinnacle point in time, the first half of the 15th century, also around the age of discovery. Now, I just want to kind of add my own notes here to say that we know that it's probably not necessarily an age of discovery, but more of an age of, frankly, invasion. But, you know, we're still kind of getting used to, you know, as we should be, using more of that terminology than saying that this was necessarily a good thing. Yes, it progressed the world in many ways. It was very important, but there was a lot of incredibly terrible, terrible things that came from this point as well, okay? But the age of discovery in terms of Portuguese discoveries, that kind of began with the islands around, I think it was like 1419, 1420. So this is in the first 20-year period since this Saturn and Jupiter conjunction. So with the death of the last of this last emperor, prior to that point, you know, in the years leading up to that particular invasion that took place, a lot of the scholars and a lot of the you know, philosophers and people with knowledge of ancient texts and things like that started to flee. and a lot of them went to Italy. Now, if we think of Italy in the 15th century and the Renaissance, this became such a hub and a center for this Renaissance period. It was also post the Black Plague as well. Of course, it had many flare-ups over different kind of chunks and periods throughout really the first kind of half of that medieval into the Renaissance period. But for the most part, the real heavy peak of that was about 100 years or so prior. Um, so it's really fascinating that this time of kind of plague and pandemic births this smaller period of this kind of new earth, and the shift to the Renaissance was really, when you look back on it, radical, because it really shifted us from an age of where most people had no access to really any kind of knowledge unless they were, maybe more of a noble or like of a higher birth, or considered special or unique or something in some way that they were able to access that education. But for the most part, there wasn't this kind of knowledge. But from this age of discovery that we speak of, when we started to kind of explore the earth, people started to kind of step out of their homes, out of their comfort zones, and start to go to these new parts of the world. We started to really have a lot of great strides, especially intellectually. Okay, remember, we have to always know when we have these ages of the 200-year Saturn kind of cycles in air signs. Like I said, it's like this age of kind of technology. Earth signs is going to be economics. We can see these cycles kind of repeating and playing out with each other. So I also just wanted to touch on, give me a sec, guys, I have so many notes. I know I'm kind of giving you guys a lot of information, but that's what I like to do. I record this as well so that you guys can unpack this and work through it in your own time. This is just kind of like a free webinar. I just wanted to kind of come on and just share some things that I've noticed as an astrologer, because being an astrologer, like, it's literally just like a fancy word for just like being a researcher and just being like super nerdy and staying home all the time and just reading things, right? So I was like, well, why am I just reading all this stuff and keeping it to myself? I really wanted to kind of hold space to just share with you some kind of cool things that I've just been picking up myself, right? And just the kind of puzzle pieces that I'm putting together and things of how this could be playing out. So I now just want to kind of jump into the future a little bit, okay? And I will kind of wrap this all up, of course, together. But the other chart I wanted to show you guys, which is also important, is when Pluto finally moves into Aquarius in 2024, okay? So this is going to happen also with the sun coinciding, okay? It's actually happening on the 21st of January. And what is really interesting about this is because really it's only 3 years away, okay, 2024. So besides Pluto having the shift into Aquarius, if we have a look at all the other slower moving planets, all the other transpersonal planets, they're all actually in the same signs that they're in now. So this is another trigger point or clue to me. If I, as an astrologer, start thinking about the collective and what the collective is going to experience and expectations and things like that, the way things are now, between now and another 2 to 3 years, I'm not saying that it's not going to change from how it is now, because every moment, every week, every few months we have new developments, okay? But with Pluto still in Capricorn for 3 more years, this is another indication that just because we have this Saturn and Jupiter alignment on Monday doesn't mean we're suddenly in the age of Aquarius, right? Because with Pluto still in Capricorn, with Neptune still in 3 years being in Pisces, Chiron's only going to be halfway through its transit through Aries. Uranus, again, only halfway through its transit through Taurus. And Saturn will have only just moved into the very early degrees of Pisces. Another interesting thing to notice on the day that we have this shift is if we look at the nodes, they're going to be Of course, where are the nodes today? At 19 degrees. They're also by chance going to be at 19 degrees, but they're going to be in Libra and Aries. So it's the air and fire axis, which is the same as the nodal axis that we currently have now of Gemini air and Sagittarius fire. Okay, so there's a lot of similarities in terms of like the planets, in terms of like just certain elements coming together, even though we have some things shifting. You know, another beautiful thing I can see this day is like Venus up here on the galactic center. Beautiful. But you know, we can't have these big kind of expectations of the world changing so much without us consciously, actively being present and doing the work ourselves, both individually and being an individual within smaller collectives and bigger collectives and so on to make these changes. And that's really why I wanted to do this webinar, because I think it's really important to kind of keep that into perspective, right? Because if we all just suddenly start to think, oh my God, all this magical Aquarian age is here, you know, like it's really beautiful to be, you know, in this utopian kind of space. But, you know, I think a lot of people that are channeling information that are solely, that consider themselves just channelers or things like that, I'm not saying that the information that they channel about the new earth is incorrect, but I think that they're actually just way, way ahead of their time. If we go back to like what I shared with you guys about the real age of Aquarius, really kicking in, not for like another really, let's say 150 to 300 years from now, depending again on the specific techniques that you use to bring up these charts and alignments, okay? So we really have a lot of work to do. And the way that we do this work is, you know, quoting Jeff Brown, who I love. You know, he talks about ascending with 2 feet on the ground, okay? Like true ascension is descension. So it's about, yes, going up into these higher realms and 5th dimension, 9th dimension, like whatever magical, incredible spaces that you connect to through your own soul and, you know, astral travel and all these amazing techniques. But like, if you're just going to be, you know, sitting in your room and, you know, you can connect to all these spirits and beings and you have this mystical connection, like incredible. If you have that desire and that ability to connect to these spaces, beautiful. But the energy of a particularly really like the next 40 or so years is going to say to you, like, what are you going to do with that? Are you going to just sit in front of your altar and just be in this space of heightened consciousness? Or are you going to take what you learn in these spaces of heightened consciousness and are you going to bring them to the people? The people being the Aquarius realm, the Aquarius transits. And that is what is initiating with this new cycle on Monday, okay? Because if the Jupiter Saturn conjunction is every 20 years, then what is happening on Monday is a signpost for what we now collectively will start to culminate and experience for 20 years. It's not a passing one day phase, okay? I feel like I'm a bit of a broken record, but I just really want to iterate and make sure that that's been understood, because I think that it's amazing that we're given such a big period of time to initiate this, because it takes that pressure off, right? I think that people sometimes, when they get swept up in thinking, oh my God, this alignment's today, and if I don't go outside and see it peeking behind the clouds, I've missed this event, and I didn't connect to this particular being or God or whatever at this time. That's not how these alignments work. They're signposts to new phases and unfoldments of humanity's evolution together. And how you synthesize this evolution is by learning your own chart and learning where these transits flow and fit in for you. So anyway, tangent number like probably 300 in this webinar, guys. So, forgive me for those, but I hope you guys are following and that what I'm sharing is making sense, and, that you guys are kind of able to kind of integrate and even having your own aha moments and, confirmations, and maybe just like feelings of like relief, right? Maybe some of you have been feeling a bit like overwhelmed with getting swept up in like it's all happening today and those kind of things, and it's just like, guys, you've got like 20 years and we're all moving through this collectively, but absolutely the next 3 years, it's not until 2023, for example, that the US is going to actually have its Pluto return. So again, a lot of people are talking about, the US having their Pluto return now, but that's not necessarily true. The exact alignment and conjunction won't be for another really for another 3 years. Okay. So it's like these are slow moving alignments, but in the slow moving of that, it allows us that time to actually integrate what some of us may be um, understanding in higher dimensions, and actually allowing us time to bring that through and integrate it into our physical beings and ground it here onto the earth. Like the next kind of 2 years, 3 years in particular is going to push you more and more, whether you like it or not, whether you are kind of like kicking and screaming or whether you are like open and ready for it. Like, you are going to be pushed into community, into being more active in your community, into being more of an activist in your own life. And I'm not speaking politically here, okay? Like, I'm not even going down that pathway by any means for this discussion. But it's like, where can you be an activist in your own life, knowing that when you make these changes, as cliche as it is, like, you are be the change you wish to see, right? Like, if more and more people are able to actually, like I said, stay in their own lanes, not get so caught up in this South Node in Sagittarius that's been happening this year of pointing the finger of blame at everybody else externally, the more we can kind of, be open-minded to new information and new understandings, and actually just accepting that maybe we don't know everything, and that that's okay, that that's actually a beautiful human thing to not know everything, that we are actually going to be able to sort of fast track ourselves through these challenges over these next few years. But we all have to be open and conscious and doing this work, because we are on the brink of a point of no return with many, many things in our physical realm and environment. And if we are spending too much time floating off into space in some other dimension and not here presently doing the work to shift all of us, through this time and space, who knows what will kind of happen from that. So, Pluto in Aquarius in 2024 is a huge shift, because Pluto also spends a different amount of time in each sign, So between his transits between Taurus and Scorpio, each sign he progressively moves quicker through each sign, okay? And then from, Scorpio, Sagittarius onwards, he gains years, okay? So if Pluto moved into Capricorn in 2008 and doesn't move into Aquarius till 2024, that's a long time, right? He spends the most amount of time in Taurus, which is around 31, 30-ish years. So, Pluto is not going to then shift into Pisces until around 2042, 2043 period, okay? So we have a lot of Aquarian energy to be collectively delving into. Yes, there are many beautiful, significant signposts, marker points along the way, beginning beautifully this Monday, amazing. But there's a long way to go, folks, and having a look at these more collective kind of energies and transits can be so eye-opening. And, I really just want to, sort of remind you and reiterate that, especially when these slower moving planets are making a shift point, it's a huge celebration, right? Because if something takes, 24 years to move through one sign, it's a big deal, right? When it kicks into that new sign, that new degree, just like we're experiencing now with Saturn after 2.5 years in Capricorn and Jupiter about 12 months in Capricorn. But we need to know then that there's a period of time of integration, just like we're living in this shift to the age of Aquarius, but we're still in these final few degrees of the age of Pisces. So we can't skip steps. We can't jump ahead, no matter how much we wish we were in the age of Aquarius, no matter how much we lived in this fifth dimensional commune kind of utopian world, we're not there yet. And I think it's just really important to reiterate that, not to say that to scare people by any means, like that's the last thing that I want to do. But I say that to you to remind you that we are collectively building together towards that. Let's not skip the steps of what our soul is here to do at this point in time. You know, I've been saying for years, even before I started teaching astrology much more and more, you know, in my early 20s when I was doing more like spiritual development type stuff, you know, I used to always say like a lot of the work that we here now that you know, that are alive at this point in time, we're not going to see a lot of the changes that we are working so hard to make and to integrate and to initiate. And that can be disheartening, right? If we think about, like, you know, sometimes there's days that maybe you guys, especially if you're sensitive, where you just feel like, I don't want to get out of bed. The world's such a mess. It's never going to change. Like, it can be so easy to get stuck into that thinking. You know, and in some ways we can see here the astrology is showing, yeah, like there's still a long way to go with things, but we need to allow that to keep us going, right? We can't let that defeat us, because we have chosen to be here at such a pinnacle shift point, because on a soul level, we do have that gift and power to be assisting in this shift, but we just need to kind of keep that in check, you know, and we can't just be kind of skipping off into this kind of utopian fantasy land before we've actually built the foundations to have that as a lasting world for our ancestors to be birthed through us. You know, we even, you know, frankly, as like as white peoples, we haven't done any reflecting work on our own ancestry. And I mean, I know that opens a whole can of worms, but I just say that in the sense of like, if you think that you are going to see a lot of these changes that you are working so hard to do, like, you know, there's a lot of work to be collectively done, and there's a lot of self-reflection work for each of us as individuals. Transits to your own personal fourth house by the transpersonal planets, if you have them in your chart in this lifetime, are going to be a big key point for you to exploring and understanding this. The last kind of things I want to say, guys, because I know I've been talking a lot, but I hope that you guys are enjoying this and, you know, following along as best as possible, is I just wanted to do a quick check just back. I don't have charts for these, but I just have a little couple of notes of what was happening the last time that we actually just had Saturn in Aquarius, okay? So obviously, globally, there's a lot of things that happen in a 2.5-year period. And I wanted to pick a couple that aren't as discussed, especially for the 1991 and 1993 transit. So a lot of you listening may have been born during this period. You may have Saturn in Aquarius. You may be starting your Saturn return. But what I found really interesting, just to show you the polarity, okay, of what can happen with Saturn transits, because like I said, it's not, if Saturn is about structure, discipline, and boundary, it's not necessarily an easy transit. In Aquarius, there's going to be a lot of developments, technological developments. So the main thing that really stood out to me from 91 was the Hubble telescope was first launched into space. Like, wow, like what? Like, that was such an incredible moment for humanity, and something that we're still using to this day. Okay, so that's such like to me, that was just like screams Aquarius. But another thing I found really interesting when I was looking through different lists, and I think this was for 1992, but we have, you know, the Cambodian Civil War ends. Okay, so this is kind of, again, you know, civil war, it's the community, it's groups, but we know that with, you know, civil wars around the world, especially in less developed nations, you know, there's often interference from larger nations and their own armies and their own kind of, you know, getting in the way of things, really. So, you know, I thought that was interesting that we had that war kind of ending, but we know that in the early 90s, we had so much happening in the Middle East due to, you know, American government interference and things like that too. So a lot of wars can be still initiated as well as retracted and ending in the same token, okay? What I found really interesting about the 1962 to 1964, the main thing, you know, again, globally, there's so many things happening, but the civil rights movement of America was, you know, really important for really even the rest of the world, from what kind of ensued from that. And, in 1932 to 1935, what was interesting that came in the US at that time was Social Security. Okay, so we can look at Social Security as a very Aquarius thing, right? Because it was a way of giving, you know, that's kind of security to the social masses. Okay, that's when it was first kind of, I guess, invented or put into place. So again, a very Aquarian type of thing. Again, the civil rights movement, very Aquarian. It's about bringing the people together for activism, for human rights, for making these changes. And what I also found interesting, though, for that 32 to 35 period, because I was speaking with my boyfriend about this, and he was like, that's really, in terms of the Social Security, and he's like, that's really interesting because, and firstly, he doesn't know anything about astrology. Okay. So um, he's like, that's really interesting because, I live in Portugal and he's Portuguese. And, he was saying to me that that's actually during that period, though, as much as maybe America was having these kind of social advances, here in Portugal is when, in 1933 is when the dictatorship really kind of became solidified. Now, that was due to events that had kind of happened about 8 years prior in the mid 1920s. But, so we can see here that Portugal, during this period of time that in other parts of the world was so freeing, that they became quite restricted. And this shows you that balance point of astrology, right? Of where there's always going to be these experiences of release and freedom, and then there's going to be this more restrictive energy. And I also then found it interesting in kind of through my exploration of what was happening, like I showed you guys in the early 15th century, of how Portugal at that point in time was so prominent in this age of, discoveries slash invasions. And so what I want to bring that up for with you guys as well is just to always remind you that whenever we're talking about collective astrology, we always need to put it into perspective of the peoples and the places and the experiences of where we are or where people may be, okay? Because each country has its own, founding chart of when it was founded. So then it's going to have its own personal transits and things like this. So this is what can also create really, amazing, free, high vibe, incredible experiences for some peoples and parts of the world, whilst, coinciding with other parts of the world having the very opposite experience. Okay, so this is again why I really want to reiterate and teach you guys like how valuable it can be to start learning to read and understand astrology for yourself, not to have to go out and be an astrologer or any of these things, but just for personal interest, because it can really help you understand, why things have been the way they were, why they have culminated the way that they are now, and what we can do with this information now, and how we can, with that awareness, assist in what it is that we are here to do as souls, as human beings, as individuals, but also as a community, definitely again in talking about, like the collective kind of, white peoples don't understand community in the way that indigenous cultures do. And so I really feel such a return to community through the return of, true land ownership, and all of these, Black Lives Matter movements and all of these things happening now are going to be imperative to the advancement of the entire collective. And again, we've seen that play out so quickly in 2020 with some of these alignments just briefly moving into Aquarius. So, we are entering into this incredible age of technology and awareness and awakening, yes, but the pathway to that is not always easy. And so the more that you can just find that community and find people and find your voice within these pathways, and knowing where this pathway and personal key for you is in your own chart, is going to be so eye-opening and so valuable to you guys. So I've literally talked for 90 minutes. Good grief. I'm going to open up a brief kind of chat for you guys. So feel free to ask me any questions if you have it. I hope this has been informative and insightful for you. I know, again, I kind of jumped around a little bit. It's just kind of how I work, to be honest. But, I hope that through maybe, what you've learned tonight or rewatching this at a later date, that it is, really helpful for you guys. And, of course, I'm always here to help with learning, seeing as I run a school. So, never hesitate to reach out to me if you want things like that. So you're so welcome, guys. I know a couple of you are just starting to say thank you. I absolutely appreciate it. Thank you all for being here with me tonight. Like, otherwise I would just be talking to myself and my astrology books like I do most nights. But would you have a meditation or ritual to suggest for this solstice? Yeah, what I want to say about meditation or ritual, remember, if you just skip back to the recording of this when I talked about how I loved seeing Juno at 0 Sag and this Vesta kind of Pisces Neptune opposition, I think that doing like a ritual or meditation around, like, I think I touched on it earlier about, but like this kind of feminine, this sort of priestess vibe, like I said, Vesta is devotion, Juno is union. Solstice in of itself is retreating into that inner space. Like, the more that you can kind of do like a meditation around really exploring your own inner realms, but during the meditation, like what I would say is like call upon the energies of this conjunction, like view this conjunction, this meeting of Jupiter and Saturn in your mind's eye, like see it as this star. Like, for example, there's a lot of people that are saying, right, that most likely like the Star of Bethlehem, was the 3 wise men, the Magi, the priests, following almost certainly a Jupiter and Saturn conjunction, which is why I always laugh about, when Christians, are so anti-witchcraft and magic and don't realize that the thing that they worship the most is those very pagan beliefs of giving gifts of, frankincense and myrrh, etc., and following astrology, the stars. But again, another can of worms for another time. So I'm glad you guys have learned so much. You're so welcome. Looking in your own charts, Lisa, you want to look to 0 degrees Aquarius and know that the theme of that house is that personal pathway to you. Okay, so for some of you it could be happening in your first house. That's obviously the house of self, of selfhood, self-awareness. The second house is values. The third house we know is kind of communication. It's our local environment. The fourth house is our ancestral lineage, our home, our family. The fifth house is more like around creativity, inner child, children, work around that. The sixth house is service. The seventh house is relationships, partnerships, connection. The eighth house is intimacy, shared resources, merged energy. It's around the psyche. The ninth house we know is higher learning, belief systems, spirituality, but sort of spirituality through the more of the path of religious doctrination. The 10th house is our legacy, our career. 11th house, communities, friendships. And the 12th house is like that spiritual kind of pathway. Okay, it's our true, like our inner self, but that part of ourself that's so kind of tucked away and locked away that we don't even really know where to begin to access that. Okay, so it's just a quick rundown of the houses for you all. You may need to go back again and listen to that later, but that's going to be that pathway for the conjunction for you. So you're having like this, this powerful marker point in the collective of this new beginning is being given to you, a 20-year new beginning, guys, in this house of 0 Aquarius for you. Okay, so maybe around Izzy's question with the meditation is like, do a meditation around wherever 0 degrees Aquarius is for you. What new beginning, what new 20-year cycle within a 200-year cycle are you personally beginning? That's a really beautiful starting point for you guys, I think. More questions. Thank you. You're welcome. Yeah, guys, you're so welcome. Okay, I'll just also show you just briefly, just because not all of you have worked with me before, in the past. So just for those of you who are curious, I don't often offer readings. Predominantly, I teach astrology. It's my biggest passion. It's how I think I can truly help you as curious astrologers an astro nerds yourself. But occasionally I do at different times of the year open a very limited amount of readings. So just to show you on my site, if any of you are interested, I would recommend booking here the Great Shift session. This is where everything that I've pretty much talked about tonight, I will actually help you identify all of this stuff in your own chart and your own personal pathway, okay? So if you are curious to start to integrate and synthesize everything I've covered and how it affects you personally, I recommend the Great Shift session. And for those of you who are curious to learn more and actually want to learn about collective and evolutionary astrology, and you want to go deep into the transpersonal planets, deep into the age of Aquarius, deep into galactic time cycles and astrology, I do a 3-month course once a year called Awakened Astrology, and it's beginning in February, the 8th of February to be exact. And if any of you are interested in that, just reach out to me, or you can book directly through the website. So yeah, guys, I think I'm going to leave you all because, like I said, I've kept you guys for now, goodness me, like almost 2 hours, but I hope that you've enjoyed this deep dive into astrology and some history. And, you know, like I said, I've barely even scratched the surface in terms of the history stuff, you know, but I just kind of wanted to put a few pointers to you guys. I really encourage you to do your own research. I've given you the years to look at. I've given you some of the alignments and the planets. Like, if you're curious, keep delving and keep using this information to build up your own perspectives of what has been and what is to come. So my loves, thank you all so much. Have an amazing solstice and an amazing Saturn and Jupiter conjunction. And hopefully I will see you guys through my Instagram and classes and all these types of things. Much love, guys. Thank you.